classical questions. Right. So I'm still stuck on all classical questions of 100 years ago. I think that it's time to revisit all of them because none of the traditional answers are actually true. And you'll discover how that works a little bit here, but it's part of the longer other studies, which I may allude to. So everyone knows who the anonymous Tana of Mishnah is. So what you learn here may be nothing, you know. So the locus classicus for our traditional attestations of attributions of authorship in the biblical corpus of the 24 books is Bavli Baba Batra 14b to 15a, as it asks, who wrote the scriptures? And it answers what we all know. Moses wrote his own book and the portion of Balaam and Job. Joshua wrote the book, which bears his name, and the last 8 verses of the Pentateuch. Amarmar, the text revisits this Braita, and Joshua wrote a book which bears his name and the last 8 verses of the Pentateuch. This statement is in agreement with the authority who says that 8 verses in the Torah were written by Joshua. As it was written, it is written so. Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there. That Moses, being dead, could have written the words Moses died there. However, up to this point, Moses wrote. From this point, Joshua wrote. Now, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, or according to others, of Rabbi Nehemiah. Keep that little phrase in mind. Rabbi Simeon said to him, can the scroll of the law be short of 1 letter? The Sonsino translation had 1 word, but the Hebrews ought. And is it not written, take this book of the law? No. What we must say is that up to this point, the Holy One dictated and Moses repeated and wrote. And from this point, God dictated and Moses wrote with tears, as it says, and they quote Jeremiah. Then Baruch answered them, he pronounced all these words to me with his mouth, and I wrote them with ink in the book. Which of these authorities is followed in the rule laid down Ben Abba, name of by one person alone, and not Rabbi Simeon said this. I may say, however, that even if Rabbi Simeon said it, it's possible to maintain. In the opinion of the sages, Moses wrote the Pentateuch, the 5 books. Yet even for them, it seemed preposterous to claim that he wrote of his own demise, and even more so, that he would have written verses after his death, making the Torah a posthumous work. Notoriously subject to change and corruption, for the children of Israel by the words of God in the hand of Moses. In the academy, however, such a belief is religious, but not demonstrable claim, not even a reasonable one. Indeed, despite challenge to their own better inclinations, as indicated by the continued inquiry into the purported authorship of other biblical books like Joshua and Samuel, the critical appraisal continued. Joshua wrote his book. It's written that Joshua died in his book. I'm just paraphrasing it. It was completed by Elazar, but it's not written that Elazar also died in the book. Phineas finished it. Samuel wrote the book that bears his name, but is it not written that he died in his book? It was completed by Gad, the seer, and Nathan, the prophet. So whereas the scriptures received critical attention in the Babylonian Talmud quoted above, and elsewhere, for example, in discussions, say, of the Song of Songs, who wrote it, and things like this, the oral law of the rabbinic sages has no. Scriptures went on to gain the attention of wide circles of modern scholarship, while my effort in a similar direction for literature of the sages was met with stiff resistance and disbelief. This is at the World Congress of Jewish Studies. Therein I claimed something that you'll hear briefly repeated here, but that Rabbi is not the redactor of Mishnah, so and cannot be. For example, and here's what I write about it. For Rabbi, also known as our holy rabbi or Rabbi Judah the Prince, Patriarch, etc., the purported author of Mishnahs, in accordance with the conclusion of both Rav Shmuel Gaon and in his famous Iggeret of the 10th century, and Seder Tanaim v'Amoraim, and also followed by the esteemed Maimonides, known for his rationalism. That'll be questionable here. Rabbi Judah the Prince is Mishnah's redactor or author. However, he dies in his text at the end of Tractate Sota. And here something that people have not noticed. And all the witnesses, in other words, there are no witnesses that I know of that don't mention his death. There are mentions to the Mishnah at the end, but that's not one of them. Yet we possess no equivalent statement by anyone, medieval or modern, challenging the impossibility of Rabbi dying so prematurely. If we add to this dilemma the fact that Rabbi is also mentioned in this text with numerous attributions of halachot in his name, which would be a more modern critique, as in biblical scholarship. In other words, Moses is mentioned in his book, Joshua is mentioned in his book. These things are actually impossible in scholarship to maintain. Then the unclaim of his authorship should be deemed just as ludicrous as the one made for Moses. Like scriptures, therefore, the claim of their connection is nothing other than common piety, not the result of scientific deliberation. Right. Part 3. There are significant textual allusions in Bavli Baba Batra to Rabbi Yochanan's activities regarding the attributions of scriptural authorship. In particular, his famous statement in Bavli Sanhedrin 86a, and that is a hidden text for Baba Batra in my opinion. And there it says, Rabbi Yochanan said, the anonymous Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, the anonymous Tosefta is Rabbi Nehemiah, the anonymous Sifra is Rabbi Judah, the anonymous Sifrei is Rabbi Shimon, and all of them in accordance with Rabbi Akiva. Of particular importance, alternate Tannaitic reading of Rabbi Nehemiah for Rabbi Judah. Rabbi Nehemiah is not mentioned so frequently that an attribution of some Braita to him is mere coincidence. Moreover, Rabbi Yochanan intervenes with frequent glosses about Job, which leaves an impression of trying to reason out his connections to the biblical book by that name. Part 4. It remains to be determined whether Rabbi Yochanan's statement is meant to be speculation or tradition. The attribution of Tosefta to Rabbi Nehemiah seems to be particularly arbitrary. It is less certain for the attribution of the anonymous Mishnah to Rabbi Meir. When, for example, we assign, and so I plug in values, is what I mean by assign. Sukkah 1:1a to Rabbi Meir, there seems to be a convergence of various kinds of evidence, from source criticism to rhetorical analysis to method and the style, that lend themselves to just such a conclusion. As I demonstrate elsewhere, Rabbi Yehuda validates, if you have to see the text of Mishnah Sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda Machshir. Rabbi Yehuda validates is a gloss to an otherwise anonymous list of situations that invalidate a sukkah time of the festival. This required the extra word pesula in the first clause. Rabbi Yehuda's position is based on an historical precedent where in Helen, perhaps Queen Helen, dwelt in a sukkah during the festival with her children. Reliance on precedent is a commonplace for Rabbi Yehuda and others, less so for Rabbi Meir. So another reason to see that the anonymous text belongs to him, meaning all of this part.
You can only show it with this.
Oh, okay. Moreover, the clause of 3 walls as a minimum for a sukkah differs from a number of fellow Tanaim. And this here you have to look at the Tosefta 112. Rabbi Jacob, Yaakov, the sages, Shimon, emphasis on 3 walls, even if one of them is an actual in Rabbi Meir's name by Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. It remains uncertain whether this is an additional conflicting source, whereas the Mishnah requires 3 built walls or not. It is likely that Rabbi, for example, due to his requirement that a sukkah appear more home-like, needs 4 built walls. This tractate itself opens in a similar manner to the start of 1:1 and 1:2. All these considerations, including evaluating all the anonymous texts of Mishnah Sukkah, yielded similar results. Now, there's all the Tanaitic and anonymous texts of Mishnah Sukkah, more or less to Rabbi Meir. That's good. Now I go on to my second list is now, please, the numbers here are totally inaccurate, and here they're taken from the Bar Ilan database, which means that the numbers in some way are accurate, and there are 312 mayors in Mishnah, but when it comes to names that are found doubled, like there's there's more than one Elazar ben Azariah, Elazar ben Shamu, etc., etc. So when you get to those kinds of names, I haven't always done the proper subtractions from the overall list. So the numbers are only meant to be representative, and what you easily see is names of books attributed to Tanaim, which means Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Nehemiah, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. All of those are very frequently found in Mishnah, but not necessarily the most. In the previous generation, I just included it as an example. We have even more Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Yossi, for some reason, I placed there and not above, but he also Mishnah, but there's again more than one Rabbi Yossi. There's those, and so this number is almost as high, but not quite as high. So, and Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, I think, somewhere as well. Rabbi is, again, this is inaccurate because the computer can only find me Rabbi Omer. It could find Divrei Rabbi, but there are very few of those, and I didn't look for them. But Rabbi Omer is not all the occurrences of Rabbi, and so it's not an accurate, it's not a totally accurate number, but it's close. Where is my paper?
I don't have to get.
It's all right. I'll go from the do it from the screen. The next slide. The next slide is an effort to see the same people scattered through Malacha. And again, the numbers are reasonably accurate, and so please be wary in citations of the numbers. Um, and so, for example, Akiva is usually spelled with an aleph, even though Hey is historically accurate as well. And again, Rabbi can't account for some maybe citations of Rabbi as mentioned above. But again, you see that we have no particular reason to think of Rabbi Nehemiah connected to any Midrashei Halacha, but of course it's Tosefta that he's connected. There are very few citations of Rabbi Nehemiah. We know nothing about Rabbi Nehemiah. I don't think he's a personality that any stories are known to us about, at least none right now. If we go to keep trying to decide whether this is speculation in the statement about Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, I also took a look at the question found 22 times in the Bavli. Again, here we must say that the final numbers had better be, at least if I'm going to ever have final numbers here of some kind, had better also be based on the printed concordances by the Kosovsky family, because they were Talmidei Chachamim, and their groupings of names, all that. It's much easier to find how many Rabbi Yossis there are in Kosovsky's concordance than on the Bar Ilan database. Because there's nothing to subtract. It'll be a separate entry in his dictionary, in his concordance. So the printed books are maybe not on anymore, and people don't use them very much anymore because there's this quick, rapid method fire that we do, and so did I. But on the other hand, I'm aware of the pitfalls of it. So here we have Ani Matnitin 22 times, but often it's very rare for it to say Rabbi Meir here. It's not a very frequent occurrence, even 22 times. And it's just as common to say Mani Matnitin, Lo Rabbi Meir. It's not Rabbi Meir, and it's not the Lo Rabbi Yehuda, etc. So it attempts to determine who an anonymous text should be attributed to. And then there's a Talmudic discussion. So I'm at the point where I can wrap up my statement, and to read as follows. To conclude, the statement of attributions in Bavli Sanhedrin is indeed most likely speculative. And in brackets, I allude to a paper I hope to, if it's accepted, to offer at the AJS. Similar speculation in a much later era has Maimonides claimed the author of the Palestinian Talmud to be Rabbi Yochanan and live 300 years. And I take this up, as I said, on another occasion, and it'll still be done this year. Yet it's in the of Rabbi Meir and Mishnah, such a claim may be verifiable, at least in some cases, even in entire tractates. And so I'm left with that dilemma, and I leave you with that dilemma and await any questions you may have.